Laurence J. McGinley. Father O'Hare gave me a choice of accepting for 2 years or for 1 year renewable. Being of a cautious nature, I opted for the second alternative. As it turned out, there was no limit on the number of possible renewals, which have been cordially extended both by Father O'Hare and by his successor, Father Joseph McShane. So here I am, 20 years later, still sitting on the metaphorical chair. Why then a farewell? Why not 30 or 40 years on this blissful seat? In this life, unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. I was already making serious preparations to resign when I began to be stricken with a succession of health problems, all resulting from a bout of polio dating from 1945, when I was a naval officer in World War II. Until at least the year 2000, it seemed that I had pretty well overcome the disabilities. But the after effects began to manifest themselves in recent years, and in the past year they have become so acute as to prevent me from doing the teaching, lecturing, and writing that my duties here at Fordham require. Divine Providence, which has graciously guided my career throughout these many years, is giving clear signs that it is time to move on and make way for a younger and healthier successor. Among the principal responsibilities attached to the McGinley Chair are the semi-annual public lectures that I have been delivering since the fall of 1988. This lecture ought to be, by rights, the 40th, but because I had to miss one lecture back in 1994, there are only 39. The first 38 have been gathered into a book, which is on sale here and for the first time. The book will probably be the most substantial, if not the sole, memorial of my tenure of the McGinley Chair. All told, I have given hundreds of lectures on a great variety of themes during the past 20 years, but the McGinley lectures belong in a category by themselves. I have given them my closest attention to make sure of having in each case a publishable text. Whereas in other cases, the theme has usually been set by the persons issuing the invitation, almost all the topics and titles of the McGinley lectures are my own. The designation of my professorship, Religion and Society, leaves open a very wide field of choice, ranging from the religious to the secular, from ecclesiastical doctrine to social analysis. I have spoken on strictly theological themes, such as the sacrifice of the cross, the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, heaven and hell. But also, gravitating toward the societal pole, I have talked of secular themes, such as politics, human rights, and the death penalty. In the selection of topics, I have followed 3 criteria. First of all, I wanted all the topics to have at least a theological dimension. A theologian is what I am, and I work within the Catholic tradition, which is my home. Although I try not to display ignorance of fields such as philosophy, history, literature, and sociology, insofar as they are relevant to my inquiry, I claim competence only in theology. In the second place, I attempted to concentrate on themes that were matters of debate among Catholic theologians. These lectures are not a simple exercise in catechesis or Christian doctrine. In every instance, I suspect a controversy is being addressed, or at least lurks in the background. My intention is to give an informed judgment as to which positions are sound and which should be rejected. Thirdly, I have tried to choose topics of general interest, not reserved to a small clique of specialists. For these lectures are public. I make an effort to avoid theological jargon and to speak a language that all educated Christians can understand. I recognize the necessity of using technical terms for discussing recondite questions, and even in these lectures I borrow from the Council's terms such as substantial presence and subsisting in, but I hope I have made these terms generally intelligible. Theologians are sometimes tempted to display their erudition by adopting the most recent coinages of sophisticated European intellectuals, even when the terminology serves more to obscure than to clarify their message. As I glance over the titles of my McGinley lectures, I have the impression that they form a solid collection dealing with major theological and social issues inherited from the Second Vatican Council and still under discussion today. I dare to hope that the opinions I have proposed and defended are true and persuasive. The faith that underlies them is not true today and false tomorrow. Its teachings are permanent and universal. A certain number of these McGinley lectures, I acknowledge, are linked with events now past, such as the advent of the third millennium. Pope John Paul II, however, used the Great Jubilee as a teaching moment to impress on the faithful ideas that should guide them and us at all times. The teaching ministry of that extraordinary Pope until his death in 2005 gave me much necessary guidance. I cannot claim that these lectures are unified by a single method. In each case, the method has to be adapted to the topic. But in general, I have begun my investigation by asking what others, especially authoritative voices, have had to say about pertinent questions. I want to learn before I speak. If all the witnesses agree, and if there are no unanswered objections, it will be sufficient to note the consensus. But because I have deliberately selected controversial topics, I have generally found both agreements and disagreements. After ascertaining the spectrum of opinions, I search out the best arguments in favor of each major position. To present and classifying the existing opinions is, I take it, a service to theology, but I think it necessary also to criticize views that are inadequate. Feeling a responsibility to reach a judgment, I draw conclusions that bring me into conflict with some of my colleagues. In my conclusions, I try to incorporate the valid insights of all parties to the discussion, rather than perpetuate a one-sided view that is partial and incomplete. I think of myself as a moderate, trying to make peace between opposed schools of theology. While doing so, however, I insist on logical consistency. Unlike certain relativists of our time, I abhor mixtures of contradictions. I mentioned above that I speak as a theologian. By that term, I mean that I draw conclusions from what I believe as a Catholic Christian. The Church teaches, and I firmly believe, that the Son of God became man some 2,000 years ago, died to redeem us, and rose for the sake of our salvation. Christ the Redeemer, who has given us the fullness of revelation, has also made provision for the